different parties can be wrong, different parties can be right, but the moment we speak with each other, as Karl Popper said, maybe we'll come closer to the truth.
And when we come here at the Policy Digest and think that an election is peace is automatic, we miss a point. Peace post an election is not automatic. Whether here, whether in the US, whether in, mention that country.
Let's look at the voter apathy, for example. The voter turnout is low. We have a political candidate, a presidential candidate who moves across the nation, encouraging people to protest from voting. So he says this is, we are encouraging a protest vote. By definition, he says one thing. By dictionary definition, it means the other. And perhaps people picked the message.
I do think that if we studied case by case, there is a bit of certain unique characters, because even where, for example, the UPC has gone to bed with the NRM, we now see Akena crying.
Where two people are, you can always expect conflict. But the question is, if there are more variables in the picture, that means you can expect more conflict. Let me tell you the situation of Uganda. Uganda has 26 political parties. These are different political leanings that have different ideologies. Two, Uganda has 56 tribes. And all these different tribes have different interests. One of the ways through which societies try to resolve these differences and contest for political power is through elections. And in the aftermath of the elections, especially in constitutional democracies that have win and lose mentalities, there will be some winners and losers, which means there will be sentiments on either side of the political aisle. Now, we sit here today with the Center for Policy Analysis Policy Digest podcast in partnership with the Open Space Center, which has been doing tremendous work in peace building, in cultivating a community that believes that there is life beyond conflict, that there is life beyond political differences, as we try to preserve this big pole to this idea called Uganda. And in order to do that, we are joined by three panelists. And just on my left, we have Reagan Muyinda, who is a development practitioner that is practicing with ULEAD Africa, which is a continental organization based in Arusha that does quite a lot of work with mobilizing young people for the future of their communities. And we all know the future of Africa has a lot to do with peace. The second panelist that we have today is Ashraf Kakaire, who is the Partnerships and Public Relations Director of the Open Space Center, who we are partnering with to have this conversation on how we can forge the pathways of peace and reconciliation after the election. The third panelist who we're having on this conversation is Geoffrey Mugisha, who is the chairperson of the National Resistance Movement, National Youth Forum. And for this conversation, we shall be trying to forge ideas around how we can have peace and reconciliation after the election. I'm going to start with the first question, and I'll have Ashraf set the context here. Prior to the election, you did quite a lot of work around youth participation, and one of the cores of participation is that young people need to participate in the election in terms of them voting, 2, in terms of them preserving the outcome of the election, and 3, in terms of ensuring that the process is peaceful. From your perspective, how successful were those efforts, especially when you contrast them with the fact that we had voter turnout of 52% in the last election?
Thank you so much, Joseph. I'm happy to be here today and sharing with you and the panel on our efforts and also what we think towards youth peaceful participation in electoral democracies. My name is Ashraf Kakaire, Sharaf. I work with the youth development agency called Open Space Center. I am happy to respond to you by saying that I can comfortably sit back and say we really did something, because immediately after the elections, from the reports that we gathered, you and I know that a huge number of young people did participate in these elections, much as most of them were new voters, but also their participation was meaningful in a way. And what we kept telling young people during pre and during the election period was for us to be in position to appreciate and understand that apart from it being a right for any citizen of Uganda that is above 18 to participate in electoral process of their country, it's also a civic duty that comes with responsibilities. A responsibility to ensure that you register as a voter, a responsibility to ensure that you go and listen and assess the candidates, a responsibility to ensure that after assessing, you choose your best candidate, but also responsibility to ensure that you go through the process peacefully, accept the results the way they are, and if you are to go against them, to use the available structures and democratic process of going either to law, to courts of law, and ensure that you register your dispute towards that. So I think we have very many young people that have gone to court about the elections. You are aware of the recently concluded case of the female youth MP, where young people showed their disputes through courts of law. We've not had very many young people participate in different riots during and after elections, even when they are not believing in some of the processes and practices by EC and other political parties. So I can comfortably sit and say we might have done something.
Thank you. And I'm going to just have this question go across the entire IO. So, gentlemen, I think it's important to recognize that there could be choke points for peace for Uganda. I wanted to just pick the mind of everyone on what we think the choke points could be, or the possible factors that are likely to lead us to a path where we have less peace, especially in the aftermath of the election. I'll start with you, Reagan. We go across the entire board.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And I must first say it's an honor, the privilege to be hosted here on the Policy Digest. Allow me to acknowledge the size of the room that we are in, both physically but also metaphorically. I think we often treat an election as a single event, and for us to understand how to heal, we must, first of all, like you said, be honest about the wounds. We often look at elections as a single event when in actual sense, the whole election cycle tests our social fabric. If you were in Kampala in 2021, just like in the recent elections in 2026, there was a phenomenon of border stages, for example, being used for political mobilization, right? So it was very easy to identify which border stage is inclined to which party. And as a result, there was quite a lot of threatening around different border stages that belong to the different political sides. There was a lot of intimidation around the passengers, for example, and that shows you how much we have localized tensions that boil up within the people. And for any elections, we never sort of sit back to have a reflection on whether we have any measures that are going to deal with some of these localized tensions, or do we just wait for them to resurface in the other election? I think what we need to look at, for example, is how then do we have an honest conversation on some of these burning issues. You have a situation where, for example, you have the current government setup look and approach more from an angle of punitive punitive detention rather than restorative justice. Where you
Reckon,
have,
just before we go to that, how do those tensions within those rival groups that used to exist during politics, how can they resurface of the election? How can such tensions resurface of the election, and how can we deal with those?
so
I said between border stages, between group of people, NRM youth, NOP youth. I believe there are quite a number.
yeah, the tensions are quite huge. So how do we deal with them? For example, I think that would take what I would consider like a 3-phased approach.
Okay.
One, I would think we need to personally, from a wider angle, look at peace charters. We saw a glimmer of how peace charters could work in the Bukedi land conflicts recently, where the Archbishop, the leadership, the clan elders sort of had conversations and meetings around how do we deal with these ethnic tensions that had started being politicized. At a national angle, at a national stage, it can also work, because what would happen is that you have peace committees in every village, and these peace committees are not comprised of or even created by the government or state house or any government institution, but rather by the individuals within that village, and they would basically mediate small political tensions that arise at a family level. The other academic approach that we could look at is how we decouple citizenship and partisanship. And that's where I was talking about, for example, the young people that have been arrested because they were wearing an attire that is affiliated to a political institution, for example. So how do you then have the government lead in create the restoration model, where we have, for example, some of these young people released, and we see the government move more towards restorative justice other than punitive detention.
Yeah, I think you're not going to the second point. I think that's good. Sure, you can continue.
Yeah. So and again, to your question, the last, like I said, a three academic phased model. You have peace charters, you decouple citizenship and partisanship, and then lastly, we need economic reconciliation. So economic reconciliation, because when you look at the recent election that we had, Emyoga was quite a very big factor in the elections. And I think we had some young people from the different districts who were saying that the fund had been politicized, that they could not access the fund because they were deemed to be of opposition or opposition leaning.
People may not receive PDM money after.
Yeah. So how do we?
It's a joke for the record of the audience.
So how do we move towards economic reconciliation? We move towards economic reconciliation when we have honest conversations around things like Emyoga, for example, programs like Operation Wealth Creation, be as much as they can to try and at least create a semblance of these programs being blind to political affiliation. Peace is when I and my brother Ashraf, if I am from the opposition and maybe my brother is from the NRM, if we all know that we can go to a certain place and get to an OWC program and get the seedlings for our farm, if he knows he can go to Emyoga and get some money for his business without necessarily our political identities being looked at as a factor. Yeah. So for me, those would be the three.
Oh, thank you.
Ways on how we move forward, especially
I think
at that level.
That's great. Right, Ms. Ashraf, I'll get you after Geoffrey. So I just to build a bit of context to this, the NRM party has ways through which it diffuses conflicts within itself. Just of recent, I had a conversation, and people who say have conflicts, made diplomats, made RDCs. I think I saw the Honorable Thomas Tayewa, have different warring parties go through mediation and that kind of thing. So from just a political angle, I know you work with a political party, and political parties seem to be either drivers or let me say, like cushions for political tension and conflict. What do you think are the choke points from a political party perspective, and how can parties, either between themselves or within themselves, create for the possibility that we can live beyond the tension of the election?
Thank you, Joseph. First of all, I would like to thank the young people of Uganda and the young people within the NRM who voted for me as the chairperson, the national chairperson of the NRM Youth Forum. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. I hope I'm representing their views when I come to such a platform to exchange views with you people. One, Uganda is a young country. For all it is, we have people that are older than the nation. It is 63 years old. And we have people, Ugandans, that are older than 63. So Uganda as a state, as a nation, is still in its formative years. Look at the post-independence Uganda from 1986 back to 1962. Uganda had 7 heads of state, 7 presidents in a space of 24 years. So
we are like Britain.
as a result of conflict, yes, Britain is ever changing faces of, so it's the same with what was happening here. So the current system inherited a broken Uganda, 56 tribes. That is a mosaic. It is extremely heterogeneous with so many languages. We cannot even agree on which language we can use as an official language. Swahili is one of the official languages in the country, yet it has a historic, it is historically demented. It has some dirt on it as a result of the post-colonial and perhaps even the colonial government. So Museveni inherits such a system. And for all that it is, the first and major, the most major component of a political party is its pursuit for power. The next thing is how to sustain that power. Otherwise, if any political organization does not aim at achieving and keeping power, then it does not qualify to be amongst political parties and political organizations. So for the NRM to survive, it had to, it's infused as, actually, even as a member, we acknowledge and admit that the NRM is infused. The state and the party look one and the same.
Geoffrey, and I hope you don't lose your chain of thought. If your argument is that the pursuit of political parties to attain power, does that essentially mean we are going to always have an eternal pursuit of power between political parties? And isn't there contradiction there? For example, the NRM seems to suggest that it is like an anathema for anyone to think they should attain that power, that they have like a birthright to it. Shouldn't it be an open process where we simply want the better for the citizen, whether you have the power or not?
Well, there are conversations that we have in the boardrooms, and there are conversations we have on the pulpits, on the stages. It depends on which context we want to have here.
This is a podcast, and we can have a broad-based conversation. Yes.
So, as a matter of fact, political parties are after power. That's the most sincere thought I can share here. After power, and we see it with the progression of the NRM. When the first 10 years of the movement didn't have elections, we were consolidating the power. As uneasy as it may make some people, that is what it is. So as we've been, when you look at the context, every after certain years, in the case of Uganda, every after 5 years, we have an electoral cycle. We are voting with the 70,512 administrative units from the LC1, local council 1. So we have a systemic overhaul with expected changes. Actually, as a matter of fact, for us in the NRM, we have it's not easy for a member of the NRM to contest for and win elections for more than twice. So we have our internal democratic processes, which are highly competitive and even divisive. We have some members of parliament that went through as independents, NRM leaning, as a result of the issues that were unresolved within the party. So when we say that the party itself and the state, the nation, is in its formative years, this is what we mean. It's demanding so much of a government and of the party when we fall into systems that were just exported to us. The borders of the nation we call Uganda were defined by the colonists. And so some were cut off. They are in Kenya. We have tribes that belong to Kenya. Actually, we have a scenario. At one point, we had a family with a vice president in Kenya and another political figure in Uganda.
MP minister in Uganda.
Yes, he was even a member of parliament. So it is that, one family. And so we have to contextualize our conversation to give it that depth, that why are we here? This is not just a conversation of the NRM, NUP. NUP as a party, as we know it, has not even existed for the last 10 years, not been existent. But then we have had a democratic process going on with other parties as part of that conversation.
Geoffrey, would you like to establish the relationship between the current tensions and those past tensions? There must be an excess. There must be an idea for which the NRM lives and an idea for which the NUP lives that are in contest in this specific regard, even when the present can't be dissected from the past or from the colonial past, as you to make the argument.
By extension, we do not have any president who left power peacefully. As a nation, we haven't had that precedent set yet. And as a result, we would not wish for such a precedent to continue. We pray and we hope that we are able to cut that cord of bloodshed, of violence, of instability, because it drains us and takes us way back to Stone Age. So with the system, back to the system that we inherited. We inherit a system that is deeply divided. And as a result, for the state to maintain its statehood, you find that you have to either have control on the means of coercion. You have to have control of the state. Yes, exactly. So you have to monopolize the means of coercion and violence. And however much you would want to shy away from such a conversation, this is the reality. So the state and we even have political commissars in the police. We have the seats for members of parliament constitutionally in the parliament. We have the UPDF in parliament. So that is a system we inherit, and that is a system as is. How do we deal with the tensions that are happening right now? The tensions, let's look at the voter apathy, for example. The voter turnout is low. We have a political candidate, a presidential candidate who moves across the nation, encouraging people to protest from voting. So he says this is, we are encouraging a protest vote. By definition, he says one thing. By dictionary definition, it means the other. And perhaps people picked the message. He tells constituents of the different regions he goes to that, you know what, even when we win, we will not be declared. It's on record. We will not be declared. So that he cut people from participating in a democratic process. And in a recent article in the Daily Monitor, I wrote about it as the democracy of the few. And I tell them that the ones who did not vote were the actual voters. Because by not turning up to vote, they voted for the system. You get me? So you cannot come and claim that your views were not heard, you were cheated, when you did not actually show up, you did not turn up on the polling day to speak, to say that, you know what, this is where I stand. Because as by the percentage of things, we see that the areas that witnessed the lowest voter turnout were actually the strongholds of the opposition. So, and how does that benefit the opposition? That by by design, that by design works for the current system, for the establishment, and for the ruling party, which I happen to be a member of.
You seem to argue that Wine enabled the president to be voted into power by
the biggest handler and the biggest enabler of President Museveni's 2026 electoral victory is none other than
low voter turnout.
Kyagulanyi.
7 millions.
Okay, and Museveni actually said that the president Museveni said to those other voters, they were prevented from coming to the ballot.
The 10 million.
But I think that political analysis is stellar, right? And we'll just circle back on it again, colleagues. In case you want to weigh in, just you can take a few notes. I will create for that time before we go to the second part of the conversation. Mr. Ashraf,
yes,
from your perspective as a youth development agency that does research and also, lives within the community to change the community in such a way that they own their process, what do you think are the choke points for
Firstly,
peace?
Joseph, as a student of political science and public administration, I am happy to contribute to this. I've before participated in an election.
Yes.
I have won an election. I've lost an election. I've participated in both an electoral college, but I've also participated in an adult suffrage kind of election. So I give you a 4-in-1 kind of approach. An election is not a love story. For a fact, an election is not a wedding. It's a contestation where people come and compete for supremacy, for power. That's what an election is. And when we come here at the Policy Digest and think that an election is peace is automatic, we miss a point. Peace post an election is not automatic. Whether here, whether in the US, whether mention that country. You know what happened after Trump had lost that election. A democracy that most of us think it is the best democracy. And when I'm on search for I honestly start thinking how I wish we as a country could define the kind of democracy that we want to have, to practice. Because we seem not to understand whatever we are taking from our friends or the founders or those that tend to define for us what democracy is. Like I said, a post-election, for us to have peace, it's not automatic. It must be intentional. You get the point? It must be intentional in the way that we must have dialogue and honest conversation, justice and accountability of all stakeholders, political parties, the media, the young people. Are we there? Institutions, ladies and gentlemen. And most importantly, the citizens. That's when we can have the so-called peace post an election. Now, when we do those, most important steps, it helps us and the EC to reflect on the mistakes that we made in a different cycle, so that we don't repeat those mistakes in another cycle. By so doing, to help us to unite, an election would be a uniting factor of the citizens of a country, other than a dividing factor like it is right now. For those that are following us on my panel, ladies and gentlemen, I think peace post an election is more of a governance issue than a political issue. Now, the problem that we do is to get political solutions to that very huge, grounded governance issue. Because conflict and peace, conflict resolution and peace is more of it must take governance approaches what are the policies that we have? What are the practices? You get my point? So, Joseph, I often facilitate to local government leaders. Sometimes I host them on different forums. But what we speak on the stage, on the podium, is not what we speak while having lunch and breakfast.
They are two different archetypes.
You get the point? So we do not have honesty conversations, even within us as leaders. So for me, I think for us to ensure that we have peace and conflict resolution, reconciliation post the election, there are 3 or 2 things that must be done.
Before we go to that, what would a political solution to peace look like? What would a governance solution look like? Just to...
I know those that are here on the Policy Digest know what Mr. Museveni is doing now. Those are political solutions.
5 billion.
The meetings he's making, the statements he's making, the contributions he's making, the rate at which he's campaigning after the election is worrying. Eh? So those are some of the examples. By lack of better words and examples, I think the followers understand what I mean. Those are purely political solutions.
Would we also argue that there is any opposition political party which is as well pursuing a political solution, just to balance the conversation?
Of course. I don't want to mention political parties here because it would seem as if we have a narrow thinking. But
of course,
you know of political parties that have dismissed some of their individuals simply because they went and talked with Joseph. What is so evil with having a conversation with Joseph? So we do practice politics of do or die. Don't you know of a team that went and met Mr. Museveni after elections?
Yeah.
And I think, please, we think we should give a second chance to all the political prisoners. That's a political solution. But what would a governance solution look like?
All right.
We would have policies in place that immediately after elections, all individuals that were, raided, those that were taken to prison as a result of a political rally, should be released in this number of days. We should ensure that those are the cases that we address first. You get my point? We should have policies that guide us on how electoral cycle looks like. When does the election end, ladies and gentlemen? Must it end on the day we declare Mr. Joseph Tainduka as a winner? Or it should end at the time when we even have to listen to cases in the courts of law and reconcile at the end of the day. We should have a dialogue between the stakeholders that I talked about and talk of the issues that did not go right, not as we had planned, and look for the possible solutions. I think that will be ideally the end of the electoral cycle, by ensuring that whatever came out as something that we did not think about in this cycle should not come back again. By the time we go for another cycle, we should be in position to mitigate that. You get it, my brother Joseph? So I think we must have institutions in these conversations, not just individuals, where all institutions commit to peace. EC, political parties, the leaders, civil society organizations, the youth movement, most importantly, and those minority groupings. For me, I think once we do that, we would have handled a post-election process of reconciliation and peace as not just a one-off, and we should stop looking at an election as a love story, because it is a process that has very many couple of events that determine very many things, ladies and gentlemen. I beg to submit.
Thank you so much. Do we have any rejoinders, any additional comment before we move to the second part of the conversation? No rejoinders. Perfect. So I would like to refer to something very, very important. Again, after 10 years after our brothers from NRM had consolidated power, there was a process that was giving birth to the Constitution, and like just two parts of the preamble I'd like to read out, and then we sort of put those into perspective. It makes for the argument that recalling our history, which has been characterized by political and constitutional instability, and then that and this is quite important, and this is like the third last. Then it says, exercising our sovereign and inalienable right to determine the form of governance for our country, and having fully participated in this process, noting that the Constituent Assembly was established to represent us and debate the draft of the Constitution, do hereby, and this is important, very, very important, and I'm just going to quote part of it, give ourselves to this and to our posterity, this Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. Just to put into context, one of the institutions that define, just how conflict should be managed is marriage. And one of the words probably I think every marital counseling does is the question of compromise. And one of the ways through which people compromise is at least like when two people are conflicting, there has to be like an appreciation for both sides in terms of any wrong that could have happened, and any bad that could have happened, and you see where to compromise, right? So I wanted us to do a bit of an open heart surgery on the Ugandan political setting. How do we have compromises, and which compromises do we need on both sides? Okay, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think for quite a long time, the come in the tent has been a structured national dialogue. And I think post 2026 elections, what we need is not a bunch of politicians meeting in a good hotel in Munyonyo or Kololo. What perhaps we need to have is a conversation around what kind of structure does a national dialogue take. And for me, that dialogue is supposed to mirror the Luchiko of Buganda kind of ways. So the agenda is supposed to be set by the citizens. And I have a proposal I think that perhaps could work. I think as Uganda, we need to look into a transitional justice framework. We have seen we have seen glimmers of how that looks like. In the Teso sub-region, there was quite a very good, unique case where the CSOs were working with local leaders and to basically reduce on the violent cattle rustling that was taking precedence there. And fast forward, we saw how much really, whenever the community is at the core of any program, there is a buy-in, and that sort of leads to success. So at a national level, what would a transitional justice framework look like? For me, a transitional justice framework would be three-phased. 1, truth-telling. 2, reparations. And 3, institutional alignment or realignment, or reforms, actually. Yeah, so truth-telling in the sense that we could have, again, whether it is through the peace committees at every village, whether it is through small gatherings at every village, and the people who have committed small political offenses, like, banning a friend's chapati stalls, plucking off cards of a certain member, come to this truth-telling session and speak out their truth and then apologize, and they are accepted back in the community. Yeah, reparations in the sense that we could, for example, get commitment from the government or the government and its other partners, and we could set up a fund for the young people who lost businesses, for example, in Mbale, in Masaka, because these small business holders, who lost their businesses because of the political campaigning, their lives will never be the same. And 3, institutional reforms, because, for example, we should have an honest conversation on how the security apparatus, whether that is the police, the Uganda prisons, and the army, handle crowds post 2026. So my brother here just alluded to the idea that the president is already campaigning, but so will the opposition also maybe. And every crowd is treated as some sort of political mobilization. So how do we get guarantees that our security apparatus is trained more towards de-escalation rather than using live ammunition that unfortunately we have seen happen in each and every election cycle? So for me, the model needs to change. It needs to change from the idea of when a political leaders meeting in a certain hotel and be put at a national level. So the transitional justice framework that I am suggesting or that I think would work needs to take that kind of shape, the kind of Chico
I get
shape.
you. Reagan, what you've done is to say, between these two parties, in order for us to achieve our broader outcome of a good Uganda, this is where they should go. Now, I wanted you to weigh in on what compromises do these two other parties need to have to achieve that goal, and how can a party like the NRM NUP now coalesce towards the future you define?
I think the challenge we have, and perhaps where we could borrow lessons from neighboring democracies like Rwanda, is that we have structured our politics to be a one-party win solution, yeah? In the sense that we sort of always look at who are the winners and who are the losers. And if the NRM party has won the election, then they are the winners. And if NUP has lost, then they are the losers. But Joseph, we have another factor that we often forget: the people who survive the political processes. But I will come to that later. So what would we need, for example? First of all, we need the NRM to recognize that, yes, the NUP, however much you may not like them, but they represent a big majority of Ugandans. And once you win an election, you are going to rule over an entire nation. So you have all these other small political parties that had their small percentages also. Those percentages are still representatives of Ugandans. They're representative of Ugandans out there. So to begin with, for any honest conversation to even start, Joseph, we must first of all go back to what I earlier said. Can we at least have a conversation around very many young people that are in jail over some small things like political attires and all that? That's why we need to first of all have this conversation around punitive detentions. Because if you are going to have NUP come to any conversation, they need to first of all feel like this conversation is going to be worth it. But how do you have a conversation when you have very many of their supporters in jail? So I think it takes two to tango.
It seems as though the NRM as well wants to come to that conversation, not to just give.
Yeah,
it looks it also wants a concession from NUP. Otherwise, for the political party, it is with so many ideologues. I imagine they have an end in mind that, okay, if we had to come to that negotiation too, there's going to have to be something you're giving away.
Again, I think it
either
takes...
accept to be sorted into the mass party, or which I think NUP has not also been very, very slow about. They want to remove the... I don't want to pronounce the word.
So I think it would again take two to tango. I think one from the NRM is the appreciation of NUP and what it represents in terms of the numbers.
Then for NUP.
And then for NUP is the appreciation that these are the guys in power.
They have been denying
They have the power. And you can't take that away from them. So how you then have a conversation is dependent on, first of all, what the agenda is. Because in Uganda, I have lived in Uganda, you have lived in Uganda. we seem to always believe that any conversation with the ruling party is a buy-in. It's like you're going to sell a certain stake of your party. Whereas, like I was saying, when you look at, for example, the neighboring democracy in Rwanda here, it's largely built around consensus building. So, for example, you might know that all the political parties in Rwanda, for example, are in cabinet, other than just 2 political parties. And there is the National Political Forum, National Organization for Political Parties Forum, where all political parties sort of like meet and have discussions. I think this government has tried now with the iPod and the new regulations around that. But again, I think the biggest challenge that we have is the reputation of the government of Uganda, that for all purposes and intents, they always approach dialogue from a position of we want our way.
Oh, yes. I get you. Thank you.
So the
Reagan,
reputation
for that
is the problem.
because, yeah. And I think we've had many political players say that we want to participate in dialogue, but not to the extent that we are swallowed by you, because it always looks like the outcome. You're from the NRM party. You might want to tell us what compromises do people want to make, and what compromises do you, maybe from a political angle, I don't know whether they are clear, what concessions you want from NOP, because the practice within the NRM party is one of consensus, actually, in many instances. So if you have to participate in a process where you compromise and they compromise, what would that look like? What's a give and take?
Thank you. Well, I've witnessed through the campaigns, because I campaigned right from the village level to the parish level, to the sub-county, to the district level, and to the national level. I went through all those levels. And what I witnessed within the party, my party, in the NRM, I saw that it works for the winner. The winner takes it all. You have to really be a strong personality. When you came from the movement system, we didn't really outgrow the system. We are in the multi-party system, but then we are, even within the ruling party, it's individual merit. And even when you look critically at the top opposition party, the NUP, you see that it's still about character and personalities, not the ideology. If you were to switch Bobi Wine to a different party, let's imagine a scenario where Bobi Wine may be a committee. Let's say it was compromised, as it is alleged. Maybe it was infiltrated by some personalities within the NRM, or perhaps even the president, the head of state, Museveni himself, and the top leadership of the NUP was compromised. Let's imagine that scenario. And we imagine Bobi Wine enters another political party. You realize that the party that Bobi Wine joins would perhaps be the top opposition party of that day. And why is that? Because the masses follow after
the personality,
the cultic personality of Bobi Wine, just like it has been with the cultic and enduring large personality of President Museveni within the NRM. So I came to experience that firsthand and painfully, right from the village.
Rather painfully.
Yes.
Okay.
From the village level, where I contested against someone who was, I'm telling you, he seemed more popular. However much at the end of the day, it was the win for me because of the political experience. I believe that now it came to experience for me to win that village level election. There was this young man. He interacts with these villagers on a daily basis. He's one of them among them. He speaks their language, regardless of the fact that he does not have a manifesto for them. He is their own, in quotations. So I had to use a lot of energy, compromises here, pulling his team apart, tearing it apart, discouraging his members, some of his people from voting, talking to them to not show up. Because I knew that if they showed up and they they would line up against me. Mm-hmm. So I went through that process. Then the parish level. At one point at the sub-county level, I called Ashraf. don't have to share. We are, because we invested heavily in an election that was not supposed to be that. As a friend.
Political consultant.
I called Ashraf as a friend that I was lamenting. I'm telling him, man, this is a sub-county election and we've lost millions in this process. That is the plight of Uganda. Before we talk about the political parties, even within the ruling party, this same thing is happening. And after voting, what happens? Let me ask a question here to you, Joseph.
Please.
When was the last time you attended a village meeting? Yet you have LC chairpersons in every village. Do you know how? When was do you have the number, the contact of your LC1 chairperson before we come to these stages? And what are they doing other than issuing maybe letters, recommendation letters, and then to the immigration? What else are they really doing other than even taking percentages of land sales?
5% is the LC word, yeah.
What are they doing? How active are those units? Because those are administrative units. Those are governance units of the smallest level. That is our smallest parliament. But when was the last time you attended the smallest parliament in the country? Before you talk about representation in the bigger parliament. When was the last time you attended that? You are part of that. So we are going to vote for LC1 elections again. Why are we doing it? What is of what essence is that? Especially in an economy like ours of 19 to 20 billion US dollars. Whereas a percentage, this 72 trillion, almost from 40 to 48 is financed by foreign debt. We are borrowing to service our own budget.
Means a better word, budget support.
Yes. Yeah. We're using different terminologies, cosmetic terms to make it sound sweet. Yet almost a half of our budget is financed by foreigners. How independent are we? What kind of conversation are we having when the top opposition political figure is in Washington about issues concerning and regarding Uganda? Let's say Washington was to get involved in the affairs of the nation. Would it be in the interest of Ugandans or in the interest of the Washington? We have the President Museveni and Uganda. We have the chairmanship of the non-aligned movement. Now we are talking about global conversation, 120 nations. This is the biggest body apart from the United Nations. The second to the United Nations. And how active is it? With what is happening in the world, we are bombing each other to stone age. So from that global conversation, we are just spectators and perhaps witnesses. We will claim we are there. And
I think, Geoffrey, you make a very, very important point, which is people no longer see themselves as to belong to the community. You seem to then say that the compromise might not even be on the political party, that it's on the individuals themselves. And I know we're going to just continue with now you weighing in on the particulars just after the break.
You are listening to the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities.
Before the break, we were analyzing what compromises we need to make as citizens, as political players, as different institutions in Uganda in order to preserve this collective idea of Uganda. Geoffrey had made a very, very interesting contextual analysis around how citizens are disjointed from the affairs of their community and how leaders as well have chosen to as well not pursue, their work of coalescing the communities, and that we need to, introspect. And I'm going to do my part myself. I hope you also do your part to belong to your community, participating in local affairs of your community through charity or just through mutual programs, right? Now to the question on what exactly should the NRM party compromise on if we are to keep this whole idea of Uganda?
The NRM as a party is a party of compromises, first of all. We, the ruling party, the National Resistance Movement, are a party of compromises. And we have been making these compromises from the word go. Actually, the compromises, it's just a question of what compromises do we adjust to? What compromises are worth taking? Because I'll give you a scenario. We've had compromises where even the current Speaker of Parliament, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, they happen to have belonged to to the opposition parties, and here they are. We open doors for them. They join the NRM, and now they take some of the top positions within the country. Why? As a result of those compromises. Now, that didn't necessarily sit well with certain figures, especially the historical figures within the party. But that's what the party is. It's supposed to be a mass party. And we're open to members joining in from any level, and we welcome it. Another thing is, we've had different engagements, reach outs. There is the iPod. However, because it's clear the iPod is not necessarily an instrument of the party or the state. It is an independent organ where these other political parties, if you have representation in parliament as of now, you come and subscribe to the iPod. However, because of maybe our big share even in parliament and in the governance of the state itself, it's looked at as another arm of compromising the opposition, which it is not. So it is through those engagements, those compromises, we still have ministers and leaders within government that belong to opposition parties. So it is not necessarily a compromise of bring them to the NRM. If you have your good ideas and you think the NRM is blocking you from implementing them, you can come and have these discussions and still belong to your party.
With an overall objective of...
You have an interjection?
With an overall objective
okay, fine. Let's pick the interjection, but I'll pick you up.
It's quite funny. Perhaps I would want to challenge my brother to tell me the ministers from the opposition that have come because of their very amazing ideas. But yeah, I think to perhaps just supplement what he was talking about, I think if the NRM is really interested in making any compromises, a few three or two things could suffice. One, releasing political prisoners. That would create a very good environment for the talks. Two, looking into and having conversations around electoral reforms. I think NOP has been quite vocal, citing issues like voter intimidation and the likes. I think they can have a conversation around that. And of course, there is always a much more realistic way of having these conversations, but I do not know or even think that the NOP would be interested in that kind of approach, which is creating a broad-based government, like we have seen in certain parts, say like Kenya.
His argument is that they have made historical compromises. That is not that compromises.
Again, we need,
and maybe what he will weigh on later is the compromises that are not worth taking, and whether maybe they are failure to compromise. They have recognized that compromising with NOP is not worth
I honestly
taking.
do believe that the NRM has tried to build consensus broadly. But as for political concessions, and that if we studied case by case, there is a bit of certain unique characters, because even where, for example, the UPC has gone to bed with the NRM, we now see Akena crying. So there is a question around the NRM reputation in terms of fulfilling its part of the deal. And before anything, certain things are around the NRM and its behavior whenever it comes to some of these agreements needs to be studied, because again, like I said, there is a very unique case just before our eyes right now, the UPC and the NRM, and we have seen how Akena has been crying foul. So if you are NUP, are you now going to join the same boat before certain things are done? But I think also
it can be argued,
it's
Reagan,
very bad.
it seems that the concessions that opposition wants from the NRM are just not practical. For example, Noop says that for us to have a dialogue, Museveni must admit to leave power, and the very nature of power is that you have to preserve it.
That is democracy.
I don't know.
But I
Do you
also
think that some of the concessions they want from a political party which has been in power for 40 years, that controls the military, that is in itself an extension of the military itself, do you think they are practical?
Just in my earlier submission, I said that it takes two to tango. So the opposition, first of all, if Noop wants to have any sort of dialogue, you dialogue from positions of at least appreciating each other's positions. You must appreciate that these guys are in power. And there is no two cents about that. They are in power and they are the current government and hold power. So your demands and your asks must also be realistic. There is no day you're telling son of Kaguta that you must first relinquish your seat, or at least promise
for us to dialogue.
to resign next week for us to have any conversations.
And I just told you that I'd get back to Geoffrey. Geoffrey, please, if you want to weigh in or continue the argument.
Well, politicians tend to have a very funny hubris. We think that voters are confused. When voters in Kawempe elect the late Segrinya, may he so rest in peace, there is another cluster of politicians that look at that as what is really happening. When you look at a legislator at the level of the Honorable Uganda, whom they almost is a national legislator, he loses to a newcomer and people so you see people over the media, seasoned politicians weighing in on that conversation, that other people in Kira must have been confused. Me, if I was in Kira, I would have voted differently, So there is the hubris. It is the hubris because every region, every constituency has its own context. It has its different challenges that are different, way different. There's another, and I know of a constituency where people voted for someone just because he's a son of the soil. Not to mention that others are not, because they are all voters from the same area, but it's an ethnic leaning vote for that person. And they said, we are voting you for the last time, you are our own. You have not represented in the parliament, you have not represented on ground.
But you are
our own. We look at the ones that are you're contesting with for the same position. We'd rather take you because, so it is that. Then there are other areas. MPs are buying ambulances. Now, how do ambulances, tally with the roles and the responsibilities, the obligations of a member of parliament? On paper, it is a different thing. On ground, they are like chiefs. When you visit a home, a residence of a member of parliament, you'll find people with different problems there. You'll find others who need scholarships, and you must provide them if you can. You must outsource these things. You find that in different constituencies, a member of parliament, when someone passes on, what happens? It is the member of parliament to call.
Take over.
To take over that role. Because from that specific constituency, they voted for a chief, and they expect you to serve as a chief, not as a member of parliament. We have seasoned politicians who have never said a word on the floor of parliament beyond the nay and yay. And they are voted again and again and again. Then that makes you wonder, what is really happening with our people? But when you look at it from the outside, you want to accuse them of not knowing what they are doing, the voters. Yet in reality, whatever that man is doing, perhaps he never even steps at parliament. For him, he's ever in the constituency, attending to the needs and the services that should have been done by the government. And you find in an area where an opposition MP is, he will discredit government programs deliberately and intentionally so that he has something to say against the ruling establishment. You get? So we are being dishonest in so many ways. The voters are dishonest in certain incidences, and the people that they elect in positions of influence and governance, we are also dishonest in many ways. So it is like we are holding, we are holding our cards. It's a pick and play game. So you reveal this and hide this.
The real one, yeah.
Yes. So that is the hide and seek that the voter and the voted are playing. That's the unfortunate bit. So that is the same thing that goes upwards to the topmost levels where you find if the UPC is crying foul, first of all, we didn't even know about their deal. We don't know the details of their deal. They have never been made public in the first place. So how can we come to defend what we don't know? They were not done institutionally. They were done as personalities, perhaps. Maybe Akena meets President Museveni and they do something as not as the NRM and the UPC. This is a deal between President Museveni and Akena. So how can you blame that on the NRM? That in the first place was not of the NRM to discuss, as it has been with so many cases. So for me, that is my humble submission on that matter. I believe that when it comes to reconciliation and nation building,
we need to have
be
honest.
An honest conversation from the word go. Go back to your people and ask. We have my brother Ashraf here has workshops where he orients young people about their roles. He recently organized one with councillors who have been voted in the metropolitan area, and I've been asking him in the sidelines, what happens next? What is going on? We have the National Youth Council. Now for me, I represent the party. Yet there's also a topmost organ of the youth, the young people. How vocal is the National Youth Council? How active is the National Youth Council? How do you expect representation and you're crying for over a few specific positions? They are saying, hey, this one should be voted minister. We are asking that, we have more ministers. What are you trying to say? From a population of 50 million people, where over 50% of those ones are below the age of 18, you're just asking for ministerial positions. Is that all you can ask? Is that all there is to ask? So we are demanding so little, and so little is still given to us just because of that. We are not faithful in the little. We cannot be trusted with the many.
Sure. Just to make sure we don't lose you. The NRM, I think over the last 5 years has been very intolerant to the leading opposition political party. What is the occasion of what causes that occasion of intolerance? And is it in the failure to negotiate? Is it in the persistent maybe behavior of the party? Is it like you had begun? Is it a compromise you chose not to pursue? Just a comment on that.
Well, we need to redefine what we call intolerance, because for all we know, we've been extremely tolerant and giving. It's a give and take in any situation. It's on record that the former leader of opposition came forward and said, I negotiated with the government to have these people and these people released. So they are closed door engagements. Not all engagements have to be public in the first place. You have to preserve the sanctity of certain conversations. So many things are happening. Prisoners, political prisoners especially. It is very absurd that in this era we are still discussing political prisoners, really. These are our cousins. These are our friends. We cannot just come out and say that whatever is happening is written in rocks and stones. No, we can adjust. And we have to have a realistic conversation about this. When it comes to releasing political prisoners, who are making a lot of noise about not releasing them? Because after releasing them, there is conversation of, how did you get out? You are compromised already. Look at the record of those ones who have been released. Because if someone is arrested, based on their political lining, after some time, you realize that this is purely a political issue and not a criminal issue. You go to the courts of laws, they are released, and after they are released, maybe by the intervention of the president in this case, like it has been for some people, there is a list is released to the public that these members have been acquitted. After acquitting them, there should be a program to rehabilitate them, because they have lost so much. They have lost time, they have lost resources, maybe their businesses, there's so much, so they need to be compensated. So this compensation has, in the meanwhile, it has not been clear. There's not been a clear compensation structure for it. what we are asking as members, as young people within the NRM party, we are engaging with the top leadership to see that there is a structure. When these people are released back to the public, there should be this rehabilitation plan, and there should be this compensation plan, because at the end of the day, they are being blamed for matters that, are not entirely theirs alone.
It could be victims of broader political contestations.
Victims. These are just subsidiaries of the bigger conversation, and they happen to be the victims in this case. So if something must be done, let it be done in broad daylight and with a structure in place.
Thank you. And to you, Mr. Kakaire, Ashraf, how do we de-escalate? How do we de-escalate through compromises on either side?
Firstly, listening to Reagan and Mugisha here, we seem to be zeroing down the conversation of reconciliation and peace to NUP and NRM. And like I'd submitted earlier, we should have all stakeholders in this conversation. So when you front NUP and NRM, how about other political players in terms of political parties? You get my point? Do they have issues to bring at on the table? Number two, how about the most important people that we talked about? The citizen. Because these are the most important. When these people fight, when we do not have peace, when we have conflict, who suffers most? Some of these people will travel outside the country, So for me, I think whatever interventions that we are doing should be, first of all, three-phased. Should be practical. Number one. Should be inclusive. Number two. Should be long-term. And like I told you earlier, much of the solutions must be non-political. Let them be governance-related. It's more of a governance issue than a political issue. Now, releasing these, political prisoners by Mr. Museveni, which is a good thing, and pardoning them, is a good thing, but it's a political act. Can we get policies that can speak to that? You get my point? For me, I real to the fact that we must have institutional interventions, but we must get interventions, the three-phase interventions, that address the three root causes of conflict and peace. And the first root cause for me is mistrust. Most importantly, on either side, mistrust in political parties, mistrust to the agents that is responsible for organizing elections, mistrust within and to the public. You get my point? The second root cause is political polarization. And lastly, perceived injustice. For me, if we get and design practical interventions that can address those root causes of mistrust, political polarization, and perceived injustices, then we shall be in position to ensure that we work upon, the conflict that comes as a result of our elections. And I want to reecho that the fact that elections should be a uniting factor of the country. You see those taglines that we used to have, Uganda decides, 2020. You remember those words? Kenya decides. How do you say Uganda decides when a very, very little population of people participated in an election? Then how do we decide? Which side are we deciding on? So ideally, I think when we are so much practical, when we are so much inclusive in nature, in whatever thing, the dialogue should be all inclusive, not NUP and Mr. Museveni. Other political parties should have a seat on the table. We appreciate that NUP is the most, it's the hugest opposition political party. How about those people that do not belong to either political party? But they're out of questions. The land question, is it a political party question?
No.
The refugee question, is it a political party question?
Employment question, yeah.
You get it? Mm-hmm. So we need to have all these stakeholders on board. And that's why I insist that it must be more of a governance issue than a political issue, where we can meet, people's voices are heard. We have that recently constituted agency called the National Consultative Forum.
Yeah.
What is it? What is the work of the forum where Mr. Honorable Chiwanda sits? At this moment, they would have been gathering the information What is the cause of the conflict?
Yeah.
How do we intervene? And then share the report to the country. Then the country chooses on how best the country think we should move forward post the election.
Thank you. So just to make sure we don't lose a point, and again, previously, there was conversation that we need to weigh in from your perspective on language and its contribution to the escalation of political culture here in our country, or even just broadly. If two people are sort of wanting to have peace, I think language contributes to how they pursue it.
Sure.
Would you just make a comment on that? And then we push to how we create a possibility of being like a Kenya after all the violence they have always had post-election.
So language is a very, very strong tool and choice of words to be used during, after, and even before such, political timings and elections. We have readers that are not responsible on what the choice of words that they use on either sides, both in the leading side and also opposition side. You get it? And these are influencers in society. So I think for us to sit back and say we've grown a democracy that we desire, society should be in position to say, we would have voted for Mr. Mugisha. He's smart. He has the money, but his language is not good. His language is not uniting. So we are not voting Mr. Mugisha upon that factor. Not because he does not, he comes from the first district. Not because he speaks a certain language. Not because he has very good policies and ideas, but because of the language. For me, when we reach to that test of time, I would comfortably say, as a student of, political science, I would comfortably say that, man, I think we've made it and we have grown to that, to that magnitude. So language is key. The choice of words that we choose. Those people in the fourth estate, the media, the reporting, ladies and gentlemen, there was that by-election in Kawempe. I will not mention, but one of the most leading, it's as if I'm mentioning now, leading TV stations in Uganda reported that there was a household in Kawempe where they were ticking of ballot papers. So media reported that people rushed in the house. It is true they found a specific grouping from one single side political party in the house. And these people are suggesting, they're saying that for us, we are reorganizing on how we shall be in position to tight mark our election tomorrow. They searched the house. There was not single ballot paper. But that alone caused firing almost between 50 and more bullets. Reporting of media, for me, it is very important. So choices of words, responsibility of leaders in terms of what they say, in terms of when they say, and what impact will whatever we utter out cause, or how is it impactful to society, is very key for a growing democracy like Uganda.
Thank you very much. So to you, our viewer, there's a philosopher from old, Carl Jung. He said that ideas own people, but in the practice of the ideas, the people who suffer from owning the ideas are those who practice them, in a sense. And it also is argued by extension that then if we are to deal with the consequences of bad ideas in society, then we have to deal with mindsets change, we have to deal with habits changing. Are there any, and this will be just the last question as we wrap this up, from societies you have known which were very violent post-election or pre-election, like Kenya, like others, are there any ideas that we need to kill in Uganda that contribute to political violence and having societies that are always at conflict? Are there any habits, are there any myths that we need to deal with?
For me, any idea that is rooted on tribe, we must kill it. An idea that is rooted on tribe, religion, race does not build society. for now at least, at this age and era, we must kill those ideas because they are narrow thinkings. They do not go beyond. There are a lot of things that can come with Joseph looking at Joseph only from where he comes from and the beliefs that he has, because there are a lot of things that come with you. So for me, I think ideas that are rooted with religion at this time, ideas that are rooted with tribes, are not ideas that build society at this age and era. They must have worked time back, but now I think we are post that, because the world is now a global village at the end of the day, where we need to associate, and appreciate other people beyond where they come from and what they believe in.
Thank you, Ashraf. Yes, Reagan.
Yeah. So for me, building from what Ashraf has just said, I think the biggest challenge that perhaps we need to rethink is our model of winner take it all. I think it is partly the problem, but also us having that conversation could also have partly some solutions towards, for example, the question of tribe in politics. There is a reason why post-genocide Rwanda is not as tribal in their political tone, and that is because there is some semblance of representation across the board, because their model is not a winner-take-it-all kind of situation. It's more of how do we build consensus. I think, I'm not saying we just borrow the Rwanda model and paste it here. We have our different realities. We are more multicultural. But we can have a conversation on what works for Uganda, in, of course, relation to our realities, where we are coming from and where we would want to go as a nation. But as is, the situation that we find ourselves in is not a good one. And politics being a do or die can only get us far than what we have already seen, bloodshed, and all the kind of misery that our election cycle comes with. So we need to rethink that. And then, of course, the others are what my brother has just alluded to.
Yeah. Thank you. And if we had to, let's say in terms of illustrating the idea, if we had to break it, what would that look like? Would we have, say, the Honorable Kyagulanyi become the leader of opposition? Would we give their money back? I'm told these days they don't receive their quarterly support to galvanizing that minority that they lead. So what would that look like?
So a lot of our political parties are representative most of the times, to a large extent, of a certain ethnic position. And normally there are ethnic grievances being pushed within that political party. And if you pay attention, you will realize that a particular political party is dominantly a particular ethnic group, and there are different grievances that are pushed in that political party that are perhaps most of the times tied to that ethnic group. So what that for me could look like, again, these are just propositions. I'm not saying that it's workable, but that what could look like, for example, is could we have, say, the leading opposition party, which of course always gets a big number of voters who are representative of the Ugandan population, have a certain slot of maybe 5 or 4 or 6, 7 ministerial positions to cabinet. How would that look like?
That's more of a presidential democracy.
Yeah, but again, the idea is how do we have a conversation where we all feel like we are feeding into this one thing called the governance of Uganda.
I think the Honorable Mao was pushing for bicameral system, having an upper chamber that
exactly
captures such a spirit.
How could we have those kinds of conversations? But it's also not bad for one Kyagulanyi or another, maybe the next time it could be Ashraf, who is the face of opposition in Uganda, being given a prime ministerial position. It doesn't necessarily mean that then they have been co-opted. We have seen that in Kenya. Odinga still was a vocal voice. Yeah. So the idea would be, what that would help us with is that then we do not have, at least from an election cycle, we sort of first now get back to doing the actual work, because 5 years are very, very short for one man called Museveni or another president that could come in the next years to both be thinking about his next election in just 4 or 5 years and also transforming the country. So I think we could again have honest conversations around what could work for us given our realities. It doesn't have to be, it can be unique to us. It doesn't have to be a copy and paste from any other place. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And just to get your perspective, how do we get to that future we hope for?
I believe that the nation is already overwhelmed by the number of political positions we have. As Ashraf had alluded to it, we are now narrowed the conversation to the political issues, to the political solutions. The answer: do we reward this one? Let us reward the opposite. Now it gives a semblance of representation, merely because there is now NUP. Because it seems like it looks, because these things that have been discussed here have been done before, just that not with NUP. So we're just saying that there is a certain region that has not been catered for when it comes to the representation, especially when it comes to the members of the opposition. For me, I bring back the conversation and the question to this. If there was to be a referendum from across the nation for each region to decide whether it remains or it gets autonomous and independent of Uganda, or to because these are things that these are the things that shape the sentiments of the people that are rarely discussed out in the public because they are frowned upon.
Yes.
Hey, when you make certain statements, you'll get attacked by another tribe, members of another ethnicity. So you say them in circles, in small corners at your homes. So the question is, if we are to have a referendum to ask Ugandans where to belong, how many would still maintain and remain in Uganda as we know it? We find that
I think, let me say, apart from one region, I have a feeling others would still stay. I don't know.
As
I could be
Mugisha
wrong.
want to go to another.
Yeah, so that would lead to the desecration of the state we call Uganda.
Which region are you representing in that?
Mugisha benefits from Uganda, so I don't think it would want Uganda to break up.
Uganda is it for me?
You seem to suggest that we need to break the idea that Uganda should break up into micro units. Yeah, you can continue.
It's the fact I want to present here is that Uganda is not as united as we want to assume.
Yes.
It's just Uganda. It was coined by the colonists, and we are still enjoying the benefits from that, and even paying the price for the same. And with what is happening with the different regions, we don't want to talk about these things publicly, but look at the governance. We have strong people. They call them strong men. Strong men and women from specific regions. That is what they're hustling for. You find that there is fights internally in Usoga. People are fighting to own, to have that as a bargaining chip, forgetting that the wananchi, the citizens, are the ones suffering from this. Yeah. When you duplicate, when you say you want to have a Senate, then the parliament, what are you trying to suggest? All you're creating is positions for these other politicians that perhaps, because the slots are very few in parliament, so you want to make more of them to duplicate more so that you have more of your class benefit when the people are not benefiting. So that solves nothing really. That just, creates a situation of harmony where there is none. But the issue of Rwanda, for example, Rwanda is a homogeneous nation. These were really one people who speak the same language. It's not that they even speak a different language. These were one people who spoke a different language, who spoke the same language, and they are the same people. It's just that they are divided between classes. It's not the case with Uganda. We have different languages, different tribes. Like as I said earlier, we have Swahili as a national language, but how many people are comfortable speaking Swahili? How far are the efforts to train and instruct in Swahili as a national language? So we have Luganda as perhaps the most widely spoken local language in this country. If you to put it to the people to officiate that, how many would agree for Luganda to be a national language? Thank you.
Is it just because there's a loop which is missing there before you go?
Yeah.
You seem to suggest that we need to accept the Ugandan identity as an overriding identity over our micro identities. Yet your previous argument had said that this is colonial. It would mean we've taken on a colonial identity and suppressed the individual identities. Wouldn't the best thing to recognize our different identities and see how they benefit from this common idea called Uganda? Should we really collapse our identities, our interests, our need to be seen and to have a seat on the table, which means a lot for pride and for redistribution of resources?
When people are writing their CV, include a line that I work well under pressure, I work best under pressure. So it is one thing to state it. It is another thing
when
to
they can't.
Yeah, it is another thing to work under that pressure. So our pressure is an inherited kind of pressure, and we seem to work well under this pressure. This is what we have as a nation. When you're applying, I remember I had a conversation with one of my colleagues, and I told him what I'm going to share here. That when you go at a workplace, you have applied for a job, and by God's grace, you get this job. There are three things to consider. There are things, the do's, the expected things from you, the responsibilities that are assigned to you officially. So they are written, and they are, you're like, oh, well, I agree with this, and I will work. However, there are also some unsaid obligations that are expected of you from the same workplace. They are not anywhere on paper, but you realize them in your organization that if I don't do this and this and this, or if I do this, I'll be reprimanded for that. I'll pay a price. So there is another thing. I've talked about the said, the unsaid. There is also the unknown that you have to bring to the table for you now to excel at your workplace, to be exceptional. This is when you come with your ideas that perhaps the top management, the top leadership in that organization had not thought about, but they are good for the goals, for the aspirations of that entity. So you bring your ideas in a way that will not hurt the ego and the feelings of the top management. You don't have to seem to be in conflict with them. You have to bring your idea in a submissive way to make it look like it is their idea. You've studied carefully the ideas for you to be able to bring this one from their own. So that is the nation we call Uganda. It is fragmented in those phases. There is the said, the unsaid, and the unknown.
Unknowns, yeah.
When we figure that out, perhaps we'll live in a better country. And, these conversations will bring that up eventually.
Thank you. Our parting shots, I'll start here, go here, and then end with Ashraf.
I think as we close that, for me, what a peaceful Uganda looks like is Muganda, Myankole, Mtoro, any person, regardless of where you come from, sharing this kind of space or sharing a taxi without the fear of political, without the fear of of any shadow of political persuasion or difference coming in between the 3 or 4 or 5 of you. And I think we get that by first of all having that Muganda mother teach their young kid that this person is your brother regardless of which political party they support, teaching them that the voting is representative of basically the ideas that you hold, but that does not take away the fact that I am Ugandan before any other thing, and that they think this identity that we share as Ugandans is what is central to our being together and sharing our brotherhood, our sisterhood in harmony. So the idea that Uganda comes first, the idea that even as we battle, we all core to our differences, is perhaps the wish to see Uganda better. Those who are anti-government and those who are for government are all, one is making the case for a better Uganda, the other one is making the case that I represent the better Uganda. That understanding will bring us to a place of appreciation of each other's efforts, but also appreciation of that whatever we do it for the better. It's like a parent. They punish you, they rebuke you, but you know at the core of whatever they are doing, even when you sometimes do not agree with them, is love. So the idea that we all love Uganda, that we all wish Uganda the better, should be at the core of everything that we do.
Thank you so much, Reagan, for that.
Well, what is Uganda for me, and what a peaceful Uganda should look like? That's a tough conversation because it has layers and layers of nuances. All in all, we move forward with the motto, for God and
my country.
For God and my country.
Interesting.
It's my prayer that different stakeholders get to deeply meditate, on the fragmented Uganda, the fractured Uganda, the healing Uganda, and the young Uganda. When it comes to statehood, Uganda is very young. So you also have to acknowledge that process, that Uganda is still in its phases. There's still a lot to learn. We pray that we just don't learn from our worst. There's a lot to learn, a lot to adjust to. As we are learning, as we are evolving, we pray that the nation gets things that join us together coherently, ideals rather than the identity, as it has been the case. So we are growing, we are getting there. We should be more forgiving of the state and the country we call Uganda, because it is learning on the job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Mr. Kakaire.
Mugisha here must have read from my book, so I'm wondering which words I'm going to use. But on a very serious note, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, for us to ensure that we have a peaceful Uganda beyond the 2026 election, most importantly is to have young people that are civically upright. And because, why am I saying young people that are physically upright? Because this is the engine and the catalyst that moves this country, whether we like it or not. If we have to have a broken Uganda, it will be you, the young people watching, that will suffer most. There's not so many old Somalis that are suffering after Somalia breaking down. I'm sorry to use Somalia as an example, but what I mean is not the 70 and 80 people that are older than this country, that is 62 years of independence, will suffer most when this country breaks. So we need to have a civically upright, youth population. While we are implementing the strengthening of youth participation, peaceful participation project under open space, we've been telling young people to ensure that we look beyond the 2026 elections. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are past the events of the elections, but how we are feeling and thinking is what matters most. Where are you, that young person? There are very many that are in prison, there are very many that are working, others are in villages. But how were the events impactful to you as an individual? And how do we move forward, So I think we need to build a more responsible leadership organizations in terms of political parties. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that political parties are not doing enough, but we need to build a more responsible leadership of where people will avoid hate speech while campaigning, where people will avoid inciting violence while campaigning, because we, the political age, are the ones that give false hope to these young people to go at a certain point and start doing whatever they do. For me, once we build that and we continue doing civic education as the policy digest here, you keep informing young people of their roles and responsibilities. I want to mention, most important as I'm concluding, participating in an election as a young person, it's not just a right, but it is a civic duty that requires you to participate in a peaceful way. And even when you do not agree with the outcomes, we have structures that you can go through to ensure that you share your grievances. But also, most importantly, as a country, we need to have a time, a healing time. We need to have a time of having an honest conversation. I told you, Joseph, we have a chance to meet some of these political players, and what we say on camera is not what we say while having lunch or doing dinner. You get it? That means we have a population of leaders that are dishonest. I'm sorry to mention for those that are, So we need to have a population of leaders that are honest, that will speak and do the walk, the talk at the end of the day. And that will help us to live in this country that is united, and that will help us to also our kids and grandchildren to find a better Uganda that is not divided along political lines. I repeat, if you, the young people that do not participate in politics or elections, understood the fact that these political players at some point meet and share a drink and take pictures, then you should stop, fighting and ensuring that we cut this country in pieces. I beg to submit.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reagan. Thank you, Ashraf. Thank you, Geoffrey, for that 2 hours of deep conversation on how we can forge pathways to peace and reconciliation. In my culture, where I come from, just near the border to Rwanda and DRC, we have a quote which says that when you're digging, a stone which you've seen cannot cure the hole unless you're blind. So what such spaces do is that we're able to see where the problem is and find ways of stopping the hole from hitting the stone, which will automatically break the hole. In this case, the hole being this idea called Uganda, which we inherited from the colonial enterprise, but as well represents our aspirations and hopes as a Ugandan people. And indeed, as Reagan said in his closing statement, we are Ugandans, beyond NUP, NRM, I don't know which other color exists. We are Ugandans, and as Ashraf as well said, we are the young people. I don't want to see a future where my child has to be a refugee in another country, or my child has to be killed by another person. I don't want that to happen. And as Geoffrey as well did say, we are young, we are learning, and these processes matter for us to learn together. Yes, different parties can be wrong, different parties can be right, but the moment we speak with each other, as Karl Popper said, maybe we'll come closer to the truth. Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest podcast, the Center for Policy Analysis podcast that is profiling African ideas and people that are shaping the future of their communities. Subscribe to all our platforms on YouTube and Podbean.